Hi, so my name's Eric Steele, and I'm here with Peter Ingoley and Lauren Bridge, and we're here to talk about the search engine we made. We call it Search of Legends, and it is a League of Legends champion search engine. So, League of Legends is a popular online multiplayer video game where two teams compete to destroy a large structure called the Nexus, which is in the opposing team's base. Players can choose from 4 different maps. We're showing one of the maps here on the right. It's called Summoner's Rift. It's the most popular one. And as you can see, it's divided into 2 symmetrical halves. Between the 2 halves, or the bases where the Nexus are, there's 3 different lanes. And the lanes are where players roam and generally battle each other. And so each player controls a single champion for one of the 2 teams, and they use a set of abilities to battle the opposing team. The players start out by spawning in their bases, and then they try to advance to the opponent's base and destroy the Nexus. So each team is composed of 3 to 5 players, and each player controls a single champion. Every champion has a unique set of abilities, and that pretty much determines their role in the game and how they should be played. Currently, there are 119 champions for players to choose from, and each champion has 4 unique abilities and 1 passive effect. In total, this results in, well, a minimum of 476 unique abilities and 119 passive effects. So due to the massive number of champions and abilities that are available, choosing a viable team can be a pretty daunting task, especially for players who are new to the game. There are many existing websites that have been created to help users learn about the game, the champions and their abilities. Unfortunately, there's no existing website that allows players to search for champions based purely on the effects of their abilities. As you can see below, we've got some screen caps from some websites, some search engines. On the left, we've got a screen cap from a website called LolKing, which allows players to search for other players who play the game and see statistics about those players. So you can see like which champions they play the most, how good they are, and information like that. In the middle, we've got a screen cap from another website, which is called solomid.net. And this is a very popular website which provides champion guides or gameplay guides that teach you how to play individual champions. And on the right, we've got a screen cap from the League of Legends wiki, which basically is just a Wikipedia for all information about League of Legends. And so since creating a team generally revolves around having a balanced set of abilities, searching for champions based on the effect of their abilities would be an extremely helpful tool. Unfortunately, none of these existing tools really allow you to do that. Such a tool could also help players decide which champions they want to buy, because you actually have to buy champions in League of Legends, and it's a pretty important decision. And so since we're all League of Legends players ourselves, we decided to implement a search tool that allows players to search for champions using various keywords. And so next I'm going to hand it over to Lauren, who's going to talk about the tool we made and about its implementation.
Okay, so this is our tool. It's called Search of Legends. And as you can see, we made a very nice user interface here that's very beautiful. What we have is a whole list of champions and a picture of each of the champions. And when you click on one of the champions, one of those squares, it'll actually take you to the wiki for that champion, so you can get more information about the champion that you're looking at. And what we have along the left-hand side is a list of different abilities that the champion has, as Eric mentioned. So what we intend users to do is just to select different checkboxes, and then we'll filter the results that they can see to only show the checkboxes that have all of the abilities that they have checked. So on the next slide, you can see that we've checked a few different checkboxes here, and we've gotten just down to the one champion that has both of these results. One other thing to mention here is, while you can't tell, we actually always are going to leave them in alphabetical order, since all of the other League of Legends search tools we've seen left them in alphabetical order, not ranked by how well they have the ability. So moving on to our next slide, we'll talk about our implementation. And so what we did here was we started off with this big JSON object that had all of the champions data. So the champions data had way more than just the champion's ability. It had a whole bunch of other information about these champions. But we actually had an extractor that took out just the relevant ability information about the champions. So we took all the ability information for a champion and concatenated it into a document. So each champion was now represented by one document with all of their abilities. We then tokenized these documents and indexed them to create our index. And so, of course, we did this all offline. League of Legends is a game that changes frequently. So even by the time we started working on our Search of Legends tools, they've already created a new champion. So luckily, we will be able to take a new grab from this API the developers had to get a new set of JSON and actually repeat this process and update our index anytime, which is great for this game. So then online, what happens is the user will check some of those checkboxes, which then we will build a query on the back end. And so we take the different checkboxes they've checked and search for all of those criteria. Now, one thing to note here is we had to make this query builder a bit smart because some of the champion's abilities weren't easily found. The actual text wasn't found in the ability description. So an example would be knockout or knockback. We had problems with this because it didn't actually explicitly refer to the words knockout or knockback in the ability description. So instead we had to be a little smart with words such as this and actually search for other words such as knock to look for the champions that had those abilities. So we take these queries, we tokenize them, and then we score them against the index to come up with our list of results. And while this list of results is prioritized, and we do score for our evaluation against a prioritized list to the users, we actually only present the alphabetical list of champions that fit the criteria. So for evaluation, we basically just came up with a list of a whole bunch of different tests. We tested each of the abilities individually for the correct champions, as well as testing combinations of the abilities to see that they return the right subset of champions. You can see a bunch of the different kinds of tests we came up on the right side. And the way we came up with these tests were because our group members are frequent League of Legends players, as well as other friends. So we polled people and also looked on the different wikis and tools that are available to try to figure out which of the champions' abilities fit which players. And overall, we came up with a 0.61 map score, which we're quite pleased with. So next, I will hand it off to Peter to talk about some of the limitations of our application.
So obviously, using a search for something like this comes with its own limitations. I would say the major one is probably the consistency of the descriptions themselves from the League of Legends API. So not all of them are described exactly the same. One that we found is a champion called Sona. A popular description is a stun, which renders a champion unable to move or attack or use an ability or anything like that. Sona has an ability that works exactly like that and is described as a stun, but in the actual text it doesn't mention the word stun at all. All it says is it forces the enemies to dance, which the effect is exactly the same, but it's not described in that way. So Sona does not appear in the list of stun champions. Another limitation is that we did not implement relation extraction. This comes into play for champions that have the word in their description, but they are not actually performing that effect on an enemy or an ally. So for example, Talon has one ability where he does extra damage to any target that's slowed, stunned, immobilized, or suppressed. And so naturally he shows up in the list for slow, stun, immobilize, and suppression despite only having a slow and not a stun, immobilize, or a suppress. This also comes into play for Leona, who is a champion that has a shield, and one of her descriptions says she hits an enemy with the shield, but she's not actually shielding an ally or herself, which is what is implied by that search term. And lastly is speed. Because we're doing this search in real time as the user is clicking the checkboxes, I wouldn't say it's slow, but it's not as fast as it could be. I would say ideally we would perform all of these searches up front and create a database so that the users are just making a database query instead of a search of our whole corpus. And a lot of this also ties into the future work. For example, accuracy can be solved by, or at least improved by relation extraction, as I just discussed, and also synonymy and hypernymy. Hypernymy is creating supergroups. So for example, we could create a new term called disable, which includes stun, suppression, etc., etc. Anything that renders a champion unable to move or attack. That would also tie into the intent and user experience below. For ranking, again, all of these pretty much tie into each other. So we currently don't do any ranking on the front end, just because that's not how the current tools are laid out. But we could include that, through various different UI tweaks. And using relation extraction, we could get the number of targets of an ability. So, for example, a stun can target a single champion, or it can target multiple champions, or it can target an area. And something that targets an area or multiple champions and can affect more than one is obviously better than something that affects one in the context of this search. And then lastly, the intent and user experience. Speed, as I discussed earlier, is a part. And then also, as we add all of these features, the UI is going to get much more complex. So we need to think of ways that we can seamlessly integrate these features without negatively affecting the user experience. Thanks for everyone's time. If you have any questions, feel free to email us, and we'll reply whenever we get a chance. I hope you guys liked our presentation as much as we did.